What's going on, everybody? My name is C4. Welcome back to more C4. Thank you very much for your continued support, sticking it out on the channel, waiting for the content to come back. Yesterday, we dropped our 7-round Philadelphia Eagles mock draft, and today I already had a plan on breaking down a video of the top 5 players I think the Eagles could target if on January 2nd, A.J. Brown is no longer a Philadelphia Eagle. And I gotta get sparked to get this video today because Peter Schrager, who is usually fairly tapped into the league, dropped his first mock draft, and he had the Philadelphia Eagles at pick 23, selecting wide receiver Denzel Boston. Now, gotta be honest, the justification of this pick is that of, I don't know if it's necessarily nepotism, you could say, because it's not related, but it's like, all right, well, Howie Roseman knows and was roommates with Washington coach Jed Fish, so there's that connection. And then you have, like, you know, if A.J. Brown leaves, this pick makes sense. Like, there's not a lot of, I don't know, there's kind of a lazy reasoning for Philadelphia to go Denzel Boston. This has been just, like, across the board, like, a very weird mock draft. Like, they had the Chargers going Blake Miller, even though they do have Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. It is what it is, but it's always a talking point. And I immediately responded over on my social media. Go give me a follow if you're not already. Over on Papa XC4 on the X, this would be my Jalen Reagor crash out if they went Denzel Boston. So in my video here today, I'm going to highlight 5 wide receivers who I think could replace A.J. Brown. There is no replacing A.J. Brown. If there was a wide receiver that clearly could replace A.J. Brown, they would be going top 5. They do not exist in this class. Even Cardell Tate, who for this video and exercise, I'm not considering and really viewing him because he's going to be long gone. Philly's not going to be trading up for him. Everyone else, though, I think could be in range, potentially. And while we can't get an A.J. Brown clone, we can figure out things A.J. Brown does well, things that A.J. Brown offers that Devontae Smith, Hollywood Brown, Dallas Goedert, whoever we're going to have remaining, don't offer. And let's see if we can get wide receivers that can kind of give us aspects of A.J. Brown's game, give us aspects of what Jalen Hurts statistically kind of looked for in receivers that stylistically have worked with Jalen Hurts in this scheme. I got 5 names at all different ranges of the draft that I think the Eagles should target. Denzel Boston, however, is definitely not one of them. Outside of, you know, his ability to go up and get the football that we've seen with A.J. Brown, I think the similarities kind of stop there. And I'm not outright ruling that Denzel Boston is going to be a bad player. I will admit, I have bias against this style of wide receiver that sometimes I say these guys suck and they end up sucking. Sometimes I say they're going to be, you know, really suck and they're very good. You know, for every, I've been wrong with Drake London. I did not like Drake London that much. I thought he was overrated. I thought he was a late first-round pick, not an early first-round pick. Kind of cloud on the Falcons. Wrong on that one. Also, Denzel Mims, ladies and gentlemen. I still think you can get him in Madden. He's going to be a stud. He'll turn it around. Just got to give him the right opportunity. But when I look at Denzel Boston, didn't run the 40, so that's just him and his agent telling everybody he runs a 4.6. Doesn't really help with the concerns that he struggles to get separation the next level. The deep ball guys, sometimes they can translate. Other times, if that's the only way you can win, it's a risky game when you're trying to project what that player's going to look like in the NFL because that's just not a consistent way to win in the NFL. And I mean, for a bigger body wide receiver, he's like 6'4", 209, I think it was his way in. Like, he gets decent route running. For a guy that's usually that big, a lot of times they're a little bit limited in their route tree. I think he has strong hands, but it's like, can he get separation? Can he win versus zone defense? I don't know. I'd rather him be someone else's risk. But here's 5 guys I think we should consider. I do have some nerd analytics that I'm just, you know, it'd take me another fucking 3 hours to put every single one up on the board. Just trust me, we have the average depth of target of 2022, 2023, 2024 averages for A.J. Brown with the Philadelphia Eagles. Average depth of target, yards after catch, per catch, yards per route run, how he plays versus man, how he plays versus zone, how the Eagles utilize him versus those routes. We also have here a snapshot of his RAS score. So we're going to be able to get an idea, athletically speaking, what are some of these wide receivers that are similar to A.J. Brown, have similar hand size, arm length, stylistically. All these little things can go in and apart to trying to find somebody that can replace A.J. Brown on this team. And the reality is, I'm going to be finding these guys at a discount because there's no A.J. Brown replacement. But I got 5 guys that certainly could be intriguing to the Philadelphia Eagles. So at number 5, I'm going to start with the budget versions and kind of work our way up here, at least for number 5. And that is Eric McAlister from TCU by way of Boise State. I became aware of him at Boise State, put up big numbers at Boise State. Boise State's kind of a what-if team when you think about it. They had Eric McAlister, they had Ashton Genty, they had Taylon Green. Yes, that Taylon Green, who absolutely tore up the combine. It's like, if all those guys could have stayed together, and they had NFL caliber players on the offensive line, the defensive line. But I mean, Boise they could have been a wagon, but NIL era and stuff like that. But when I look at Eric McAlister, again, we're not replacing A.J. Brown, but what elements of some of these guys can we steal that can give us a little A.J. Brown in the offense if he's no longer here? Eric McAlister, bigger wide receiver at 6'3", 195 pounds. He's 23 years old. He's an outside X. I think very similar speed range to A.J. Brown. Ran a 4.53 with a 1.57 10-yard split. The downside for him, if you're trying to go into ultimate RAS score, if you're trying to play that, he had a 28.5-inch vertical, which is kind of rough. But these are guys that both have big hands, big wingspans, and yak ability. Eric McAlister last year at TCU, 71 catches, 1,100 yards, almost 1,200 yards, and 10 touchdowns. He's the type of playmaker that can win versus man and zone. If you're going off just the metrics, he has some of the best grades going up against man coverage in this year's class. He has elite yards after catch grades compared to some of the wide receivers in this class, and he's not one-dimensional. He has a 2.63 yards per route run on average against zone defense. Got to be able to win versus zone. That's put him that's above average for the top 20, 25 wide receivers in this year's class. So he can win a bunch of different ways. He has a very good borderline, I'd say, elite yak ability in comparison to a lot of this class. The big knock for Eric McAlister, though, is overall not the greatest route tree, and he has off-the-field issues. I think he'd probably be a third, fourth-round pick if he didn't have the off-the-field issues, had a deadly weapons charge in 2024. It's not even like something that was in high school. It was very recently, so I think that's kind of put him into that value range of a day 3 selection. And I think this is one of those ones, even if we don't trade A.J. Brown, and you still want to go find a wide receiver, and you want to leave the draft with a wide receiver, I think Eric McAlister and what he could bring to this team as a yak, giving us some depth on the outside, would make a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of value there. At number 4, it's kind of the opposite of Eric McAlister, where I think he's the bargain. Jordyn Tyson would be very expensive in terms of draft capital. You'd have to draft him at pick 23, but if you've been doing mock drafts or paying attention to people that pay to get published mock drafts out in the World Wide Web over the last 2 weeks, Jordyn Tyson has been falling to the Eagles in a couple mock drafts. The reason is the injuries. He has probably the biggest injury red flag out of any top player in this year's class. It's going to take a team that has a history of getting injury-prone players and it working out, a team with a great medical team that can kind of give the green light that, yeah, we're good with this guy. We think he'll be good. I think Philly kind of gets in that area. I look no further than Landon Dickerson. Landon Dickerson, arguably in the class he came out, was the most talented player with an injury-prone red flag. Philly drafted him. It's worked out well. So I think they could double dip. They could trust that belief in their evaluation process of injury-prone players. It could be all in on Jordyn Tyson. Now, out of every player in this list, maybe does the least A.J. Brown type things and elements to the offense, but there are similarities. 6'2", 203 pounds, 21 years old, had 700 yards, 8 touchdowns in an injury-plagued season with Arizona State last year, but he's an outside wide receiver. You look at his ability, A.J. Brown's ability. I took the averages of 2022, 2023, 2024 for A.J. Brown. 3.56 yards on average versus man, 2.25 versus zone. Jordyn Tyson, 3.44 versus man, 2.39 versus zone. I think the bad thing with Jordyn Tyson, if you're going into the analytics, that really steps out is, and when you watch him play, he's clearly a great athletic profile. We don't have the RAS numbers. We don't have the speed, agility, explosive ratings. Eye test looks pretty good, that he'd be one of the better athletes of these top-tier wide receivers in this class. But he's more like, this is a guy that you want to hit outside the numbers, which is an element that obviously you're going to be losing with A.J. Brown that you would get with Jordyn Tyson. However, I think he's kind of average work in the middle of the field and his yards after the catch ability for a guy that's clearly athletic. Mike doesn't have that extra little wiggle, doesn't have that extra little juice to make a guy miss. You'd like to have that if you're trying to replace A.J. Brown. That is an element that, like with Devontae Smith's not a guy that you want trying to break tackles on slant plays. You kind of want something to come and replace it. You don't necessarily get that with Jordyn Tyson, but something that was very surprising with Jordyn Tyson is 26 reps on the bench press. That is shocking. A.J. Brown got 19. Obviously, A.J. Brown is almost 3-inch longer arm length, and if you've ever done the bench press, guys with shorter arms, a little bit easier. Get that weight up off your chest every now and again, but still, 26 reps. And what does bench press translate to wide receiver? Well, have you ever seen A.J. Brown just like alpha guys, where the ball's up in the air, he just goes up and grabs it, or will snatch it from a DB, it's 50-50? Yeah, strength plays a big part of that. Hand fighting. There's so much elements of A.J. Brown, like being arguably, probably with DK Metcalf, the strongest wide receiver in the league, that 26 reps on the bench press. Didn't know Jordyn Tyson kind of had that in his game, but he clearly does. You can't manufacture 26 reps on the bench press So the fact that he's kind of come in a little bit surprisingly as a powerhouse of the wide receivers in this year's class, it was like enough for me to say he's not really an A.J. Brown style. He wouldn't really be able to offer a crazy amount like for like, especially for that first round investment, because you absolutely would have to get him at 23. That if you're trying to just replace A.J. Brown, you're not really getting a carbon copy, skill set wise. But I think of the wide receivers that might not fit the perfect mold of A.J. Brown, I think Jordyn Tyson is the most intriguing as long as the medicals are fine. Next up at number 3, we have Ted Hurst, Georgia State wide receiver, 6'3", 206 pounds, 21 years old, had 999 yards and 6 touchdowns. Wow, you couldn't throw him a screen pass in the last game, huh? Okay, I see how it is. Big time RAS score, 9.9 RAS, 36.5-inch vertical in comparison to A.J. Brown's 36. Ran a 4.42 with a 1.55 split, very similar speed profile to an A.J. Brown. His hands and arm length, wingspan, very similar to A.J. Brown, appropriate to the closest out of any of the wide receivers that I'm going to talk about on this list. If you're trying from like a pure body composition that does translate to play style, you get a lot with that with Ted Hurst. And we started this video off talking about Denzel Boston. In my opinion, give me Ted Hurst over Denzel Boston for similar style. And I think the thing that goes into that take is, yeah, Denzel Boston could go first round, late first round, early second round. Current expected range for Ted Hurst is like third round. Literally, there was an excerpt, I think Tony Pauline, who does, he's been around forever in the draft circle, said Ted Hurst kind of vibes our third round pick. Maybe a team like Philly could view him as a late second round pick. So the Eagles apparently have some interest. Heard that, did a little bit more of a deep dive. I like what he brings to this game. There are a lot of elements that he could come in. The jump ball ability, his deep ball tracking ability. He's an outside wide receiver. He can win versus man. He's really good winning versus zone, which is something that the Philadelphia Eagles as an offense as a whole has struggled, that he hopefully improves under Sean Mannion. He has been statistically better versus zone coverage than man coverage. I think for his style, I think he relies a little bit less on like the contested catch jump ball that maybe something like a Denzel Boston thrives on, which makes it a little bit maybe easier to project how and different ways Ted Hurst can win in the NFL versus Denzel Boston. Obviously, athletic profile that we have verified testing that kind of matches the eye test for Ted Hurst, gives him a slight advantage in my opinion when you're comparing him to Denzel Boston, but still not a perfect A.J. Brown replacement. There's a guy kind of average yards after catch type player, which you always kind of want that plus yards after catch play if you're trying to replace what A.J. Brown can bring in the offense. It's not like you're going to want, again, Devontae Smith running in the middle of the field trying to break tackles. I also think there's a chance he's not really a powerhouse or could struggle press man coverage against some physical DBs in the NFL. I don't think there's a lot of worry with the current landscape of the DBs in the NFC East that you got to worry about. But I think there is a lot to like at Ted Hurst's game, especially if you can get him in that third round range. I think he certainly is also in the pool of, even if we keep A.J. Brown for this year, I think you could target Ted Hurst in that third round if he even falls a little bit. I'd be perfectly fine adding a wide receiver of Ted Hurst's quality in round 3 in this year's draft, regardless of what we do with A.J. Brown. Wide receiver 2 on my list is Bryce Lance from North Dakota State. Same range as Ted Hurst. That's why I have them right here on the list. I think they're both going to be guys that Philly would be, if they are interested, targeting in the third round, ideally. With Bryce Lance, 6'2", 204 pounds, 23 years old, had 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns last year for North Dakota State. Also worth noting, he had 17 touchdowns in 2024, because the big knock for him is always going to be level of competition. Even though we know as Eagle fans firsthand that players from North Dakota State, at least early in their career, could come in and absolutely play at an elite level in the NFL. We just want to talk about how it ended there a little bit. Bryce Lance, 9.95 RAS score, 41.5-inch vertical, 4.34, 1.49, 10-yard split. Does actually have literally equal agility grades to what A.J. Brown has if you're kind of RAS comparing there a little bit, but clearly a different athlete than A.J. Brown. But what I like about Bryce Lance, he's a gamble. He's an absolute gamble. Because I think, maybe some concerns about play strength, I think similar to Ted Hurst, that you just don't really have with A.J. Brown. Watching Bryce Lance in North Dakota State for the most part, literally it's just like, my note was zoom. Some of his best plays are him just literally running, being 6'2" and running a 4.34 against guys that North Dakota State play on an average basis. Just like, okay, how translatable is this going to be to the NFL when everybody's fast? I think there's going to be a really good player there, but I think the thing that stood out the most to me about Bryce Lance, the underlying metrics, not crazy yak, which kind of stings. Again, we can't find an A.J. Brown replacement. We can't find a perfect A.J. Brown replacement, but we have a guy here one of the best wide receivers in this whole class, and including the top end guys, including Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Jordyn Tyson, all these guys, at winning versus zone covers. And I feel like that is, like, if you're going into the nerd advanced analytics, and obviously there's context, and these numbers are just numbers, 3.37 win rate against zone. That is the best out of any wide receiver we talk about in this class. So you can win versus zone, which is what you had to beat in today's NFL, and he's 6'2", height, weight, speed, 4.34. Better hands than Christian Watson. That is the easy, lazy comp, even though there are a lot of similarities to the game as their deep threat ability. I think he's better than Christian Watson. And I think for Philadelphia, kind of view this as, this just might be the value wide receiver. Some elements, ability to win on the outside, does replicate and represent like what we could replace with what we're losing with A.J. Brown. But I just think the underlying stats for Bryce Lance, if we just have to go find another wide receiver, we have to find the value wide receiver, I think Bryce Lance is my guy in that third round. I like the ability. I'm not worried about the level of competition, even though literally, again, you could even like hyper meta search like Bryce Lance, whatever, cut up tape, caddy cut ups, whatever you want. He's just running past people so often where it's just like, okay, well, I mean, that's sick. If he could do that, I mean, 4.34 at 6'2", he's probably going to be able to get away with that at a decent amount, a decent clip at the NFL level. Plus, he has strong hands. But it's a tough project. That's why this guy is not going to be going in the first round. He's going to be going a little bit later. He would be absolutely a style of player, though I would love Philadelphia to take a gamble on. My number one wide receiver for the Eagles to target to replace A.J. Brown as close as they possibly can is Omar Cooper Jr. Now, I've been early on Omar Cooper. There's a couple people. But when Omar Cooper on these websites were going like fourth round, he's kind of almost flirting with a day 3 pick. I was having Philadelphia draft him I have at least 2 mock drafts on my X where I have Omar Cooper going to the Eagles second round, third round, somewhere in that range, and being like, guys, we're just here early. Now everyone loves him as a first rounder. I would say that's kind of my biggest stock on Omar Cooper Jr. is I loved him when he was a second rounder, getting a little pricey as a first rounder. But what I think he can bring to the Eagles, if we lose A.J. Brown, I think he's probably the best fit. So Omar Cooper last year, 900 yards, 13 touchdowns for the national championship winning Indiana Hoosiers. Has some of the best highlights. His catch against Penn State was absolutely incredible, which, in a vacuum, yes, kind of is what it is, but also gigantic moment. He stepped up. He was the go-to target. They have another really good wide receiver kind of on my honorable mentions. I have Chris Bell from Louisville and Elijah Surratt from Indiana as my honorable mentions there. But when Fernando Mendoza needed a play, he was going to Omar Cooper. There is value in that. There is mentality value in that. He has the same type of mentality, I think, in traits of give me the ball, I want the ball, that as long as it contains, that we love A.J. Brown having that type of mentality. It's something that's, from a personality standpoint, separates him from Devontae Smith for better or for worse. I think you get that in Omar Cooper Jr., 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, 22 years old, 8'5" RAS, very similar athlete to an A.J. Brown. 9'6" hand, just, wingspan a little bit shorter, 37-inch vertical to A.J. Brown's 36. He ran a 4.47 with a 1.55 10-yard split. A.J. Brown 4.49 with a 1.56. So athletically speaking, they are pretty much in line. You look at what A.J. Brown does. You assume and associate A.J. Brown yards after catch and a consistent ability to win versus man in zone. A.J. Brown's average depth of target was 12. Omar Cooper, average depth of target, 12.5. One of the best yards after catch, make guys miss, take a slant in the middle field, and break tackles, and take a 5-yard slant and get 15, 20 yards of it in this year's class. He has a 2.36 yards gain per man, 2.57 yards gain per zone. What that means to me, very good. Balanced at being able to beat both. He's not one-dimensional, doesn't struggle outright versus man or getting off versus zone. You always, again, want to try to prioritize being able to get open versus zone. The issue that comes with Omar Cooper Jr., because he's so well-rounded, he can win, total route tree's good, can win a lot of different ways depending on whatever the opposing defense is trying to play, be it man or zone, has spectacular catch, clutch factor, whatever you want, how to quantify that for evaluating a player. The issue, athletically, right there with A.J. Brown, maybe not as powerful, but has a lot of contact balance and power elements to his game that you see all the time, yards after catch. The knock with Omar Cooper is, until this year, he's an outside wide receiver, has plenty of experience playing on the outside, but his best season with Indiana this year, he played primarily in the slot. So while I think you can view that as his inside-outside versatility, which, great, sure, let's put him on the outside. We need him on the outside. There's an element where it's just like, okay, well, I mean, your best season was slot. And if you have to because the price is coming up. You got Omar Cooper in the second round, and you hope with that versatility he can be an outside guy, but he ends up pushing on the inside. Second round pick, you go, okay, still fine. First round pick, pick 23, drafted to be an outside guy, has to come in and eventually find his home at the slot to replace AJ. You know, it's maybe not the exact return on investment that you're looking for, and that's kind of the risk with Omar Cooper, but I think in terms of availability, should probably be there at pick 23. Play style, ticks the most boxes, has the most similarities between what he does, how he wins, and his athletic profile than any other target for A.J. Brown in this year's class. I mean, there's a lot of people that say, well, Chris Bell. Chris Bell he's like the big, jacked-up wide receiver, but Chris Bell, for me, when I was watching him play, I was excited. I was like, okay, this is going to be the guy coming off an injury. A lot of things start looking at Chris Bell like, that could be our guy. That could be the guy Harry Osman likes. It's lazy comp, but, like, looks like Tarzan plays like Jane. I think on body comp, yeah, you get Chris Bell, A.J. Brown. Highlights, you look at a 30-second cut-up of some of the best plays that Chris Bell has made. You see a lot of A.J. Brown in that. Jump ball ability, bully ball, if you will. But, like, a lot of also concerns. Is that going to translate to the next level? Yes, you just dominated inferior competition because you're a powerhouse. Everyone's going to be like that in the NFL. What else do you offer to the table? And I think there's a lot of inconsistencies to Chris Bell's game. But I would also say, like, he'd be a guy, if you can get him at a value, I'd be in consideration. But in terms of, like, what we know, what we've seen, what we've had tested, and body of work, Omar Cooper Jr. would be, if we lose, and we know Howie Roseman for this draft, that there's already a handshake deal that A.J. Brown on January 2nd is going to the New England Patriots, I think Omar Cooper would be the number one wide receiver that would make that trade sting as least as possible. But here are 5 names. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm just a guy that likes to pretend to be a scout on the internet. So absolutely, if you are passionate about any of these players or anybody that I left off this list that you think Philly should go target, definitely let me hear it in the comment section below. If it's your first time stopping by, draft content coming fast and heavy for you here on More C4. So hit that subscribe button, smash the like button if you enjoyed today's video, and until next time, it's your boy C4. Say peace out, love you, have a good one.